Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all of you from across the globe. A warm welcome to the virtual book launch of the book A Harvest of Inspiring Tales by Soundaranayaki Vairavan. I am Preeti Dubey and I'll be your host for the event. The book A Harvest of Inspiring Tales is a compilation of interviews of eminent personalities of current times, conducted over 20 years. What makes the book unique is that every interview instantly connects with the readers and touches their heart, as the author approaches every interviewee with the simplicity of a commoner, and yet unravels the facts that surprise the readers and inspires them to aspire for what seems impossible. The author also brilliantly presents a collection of events that would interest a wide range of readers. A little introduction about the author herself. Mrs. Soundaranayaki Vairavan has authored 7 books, and this is her 8th one. She is the editor of Online Voice, The Sing Int, and has written more than 100 articles in both English and Tamil for leading publications like The Hindu, Kumudam, Dinamani in India, and her articles have got published in various countries like Australia, Sri Lanka, Congo, Africa, the United States of America, and Canada. She is the founder of Kala Manjari, an organization that aims to promote Tamil classical music and has released 5 music albums. Let us get to know the author a bit. Let me take you to her beautiful home and hear what she has to say about her book.
Hello, hi Preeti, welcome home.
Hello.
Hi, thanks for
Such a
coming.
pleasure to be here. Soundarya, heartiest congratulations.
Thanks, Preeti.
This is your 8th book.
That's right.
And how are you feeling about it?
Quite satisfied.
Yeah.
Happy.
Yeah. This book is so unique. It is a compilation of so many interviews that have been taken for over 20 years.
20 years. Exactly, that's right.
Yeah.
Since 2001.
And every interview is so engaging and so inspiring. I'm wondering what inspired you to take interviews in the first place?
I started writing articles for few magazines.
Yeah.
One day in 2001,
Yes.
former finance minister Mr. P. Chidambaram's mom, she is my grandmother's distant relative, and she had come home.
Yeah.
So my mom introduced her to me, and I have always had so much liking for Mr. PC. So when I first saw her, I was so excited, and I started asking so many questions about his childhood and what advice she would give, how would he behave when he was tired, and so many things. So she asked me, "Are you interviewing me?" Then my mom said, "Why don't you interview her? It will be a good subject." I said, "Yes, can I come home tomorrow and take an interview with you?" She said, "Why not? Just come." Until I went there, I never knew the techniques of interviews. So I just went there, I just asked her a few questions, and then she answered me. At the end of the day, I wrote all those questions and answers in a paper, and it got published in a community magazine.
Okay.
It was appealing to many people, and many appreciated me. Then I thought, why don't we take interviews regularly, consistently?
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And it's very nice that your very first interview was so appreciated.
Yes,
and,
it was.
and you got encouraged to take many more.
True, that's the truth. Yes.
Yeah, and the most amazing part that I feel about the book is that it covers people from so many diverse fields.
Yes.
They are, politicians, they are diplomats, they are economists, they are musicians, social service, people in social service. So such a huge range. How did you select those personalities?
Actually, I have no selection criteria.
Okay.
The magazine caters to Indian diaspora, and it caters to all demographics. So that one became very easy for me to take interviews from different fields.
So how did you persevere? What was your biggest challenge? And what made you to persevere for so long and come up to this book?
It's actually, the challenges have always been there.
Yeah.
They all are busy people and they all have meetings and engagements throughout. For budding writers like me, the initial stages, it was really a challenge, but luckily, whenever I approached people, okay, you can come meet me for 15 minutes or 20 minutes, I would make sure I go there, but the interviews would go for more than 40 minutes.
Okay.
So it was very easy for me. In that sense, I think I was lucky. When I approached them, they could give me an appointment. So I think the challenges were not that great. Yeah, so I always make sure I read about them and then I go and ask relevant questions. So I go prepared, so I finish it on time.
Yeah.
I come and then I just draft it as promised. I will send them. So I think I was quite disciplined also.
Okay.
Thanks for taking us through the memory lane and sharing the special moments with us, Soundarya. Ladies and gentlemen, the moment we have been waiting for has finally arrived. It's time for the book launch. Let's celebrate this momentous occasion, albeit virtually, with the author Soundaranayaki Vairavan. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome the guest of honor, Mr. Benji Dorji. Mr. Benji Dorji is a multifaceted personality. He has served as a judge of the High Court of Bhutan and the Chief Justice of Bhutan. He was a deputy minister at the Ministry of Social Services. He served as ambassador to the United Nations in Geneva, also accredited to Austria, Finland, Sweden, Norway, Denmark, Netherlands, European Union, IFAD, the International Fund for Agricultural Development in Rome, FAO, the Food and Agricultural Organization, Rome. He was a deputy minister and special advisor to the National Environment Commission. He founded the first and only environmental NGO, Royal Society for the Protection of Nature in Bhutan. For all his remarkable services, he has won several prestigious awards. Let us hear what he has to share about the book.
Namaste, Sundara Vairavan. I'd like to offer my heartiest and most sincere congratulations on the launch of your ebook. You have so many illustrious people whom you have met and recorded, and I hope it will be beneficial to your many fans and readers. These are very eminent people with many words of wisdom to share with your general public, and I'm sure it will be to the benefit of them all. I wish you all success on the launch of your ebook. Tashi Dile.
வணக்கம், என் பெயர் மதிவாணன். நான் myindia.ag-யின் நிர்வாக இயக்குனர். myindia.ag என்பது ஒரு ஆன்லைன் சூப்பர் மார்க்கெட். சூப்பர் மார்க்கெட் வியாபாரத்தில் எங்களுக்கு குறைந்தது 25 வருட அனுபவங்கள் உண்டு. எங்களுடைய இணையதளத்தில் புத்தகங்கள், பூஜை பொருட்கள், மளிகை சாமான்கள், காய்கறிகள், ஹோம் அப்ளையன்ஸ் மற்றும் அனைத்து விதமான பொருட்களும் கிடைக்கும். எங்களுடைய இணையதளத்தில் பொருட்கள் ஆர்டர் செய்தவுடன் 24 மணி நேரத்தில் பொருட்கள் உங்கள் வீடு தேடி வந்து சேரும். எங்களுடைய சேவையை ஒரு முறை பயன்படுத்தி பாருங்கள். எங்களுடைய பொருட்களின் தரமும் சேவையும் உங்களை மிகவும் பிடிக்கும். நன்றி, வணக்கம்.
ஏங்க இந்த லிஸ்ட்ல இந்த கலபம், சாம்பிராணி, சந்தனம் எல்லாம் இல்லையேங்க. இதெல்லாம் இங்க கிடைக்காதுன்னு 15 நாளைக்கு முன்னாடியே லிஸ்ட் கொடுத்தாரு ஐயர்.
யார் சொன்னா ஈஸியா கிடைக்காதுன்னு?
கிடைச்சாலும் இந்த ஷார்ட் டைம்ல எங்க போய் வாங்குறது?
நீ எங்கேயும் போவானா, போன்ல மை இந்தியாவை லாகின் பண்ணி ஆர்டர் பண்ணு.
அவ்வளவுதானா?
இப்போ இந்தியாவே உங்களை தேடி வருது. myindia.sg எப்ப வேணாலும் லாகின் பண்ணி பொருட்களை சூஸ் பண்ணுங்க, ஆன்லைன்ல பே பண்ணுங்க. 24 மணி நேரத்தில் டெலிவரி. தரமான இந்திய பொருட்களை சிங்கப்பூரில் இந்திய விலையில் வாங்க சிறந்த இடம் myindia.sg.
It is time for the most exciting and awaited segment of this book launch. We have a phenomenal panel of experts and academicians. They are actively working as the change agents and are here to join us. They carry years of rich experience and are very well traveled. They have joined us from different locations, which has only been possible as the launch is online. All the eminent speakers will share their thoughts, reflections, and key insights from the book with us today. I'd like to take a moment to introduce the panel. I warmly welcome Dr. Chitra Shankaran. She is the Deputy Head and Chair of Literature, Department of English Language and Literature at National University of Singapore. She is founding and current president of the Association for the Study of Literature and Environment in ASEAN. Chief editor for the Journal of Southeast Asian Eco-Criticism and winner of several awards. Very glad to have you with us, Dr. Chitra.
Thank you very much, Preeti.
Mr. Pitaji Pichappan. Currently, he is the Vice President with Concentrix USA and resides in Tampa, Florida. He is an advisory board for startups in Silicon Valley and India, holds 3 patents, and authored white papers that were published in leading business magazines. I warmly welcome Mr. Pitaji Pichappan.
Thank you, Preeti.
Mr. R. Rajaram. He is currently the registrar at National University of Singapore. He is actively involved in community work and is currently appointed by the Ministry of Community Culture and Youth as the advisor to the Tamil Language Council. He's also the recipient of 2 National Day Awards and was appointed as the Justice of Peace and the year 2020. A pleasure to have you with Mr. Rajaram.
Hi, Preeti. Hello, everyone.
Mr. R. Narayanan is a director with Deloitte Consulting and has over 17 years of progressive experience in the technology and digital space. He collaborates with leading clients in the consumer industries and health insurance industry to help them unlock business value with the power of digital enabled solutions. A warm welcome to you.
Thank you, Preeti. Hi, everyone.
So it's such a pleasure to have such eminent speakers with us. A warm welcome to all of you once again. And without further ado, let's begin with the discussion. The book, Interesting, Inspiring Interviews by Soundara, is a compilation of several interviews conducted over past 20 years. I've had the opportunity to glance upon the book electronically, and I'm very impressed with what I saw. I would like to hear from you. What do you think about the interviewing style of the author and the structure of the content presented in the book? Dr. Chitra Shankaran, you have published 2 monographs and edited several volumes with highly acclaimed publishing houses. Can I please begin with you?
Thank you, Preeti. That's a very interesting question. I think this is a fascinating book from the literary point of view because it is genre defying. By that, I mean that it does not subscribe to the boundaries set by a genre. Most literary efforts are constrained by genre. For example, if you are picking up a novel, it's usually a book-length prose narrative with characters and a plot, and you know what to expect. Similarly, if you are interested in reading Milton's Paradise Lost or Ramayana, you know that it's an epic and it's a long narrative poem in a kind of an elevated style, recounting the deeds of some hero or heroic figure. So similarly, you have expectations of a collection of interviews, right? You normally expect these collections to have an overarching theme. So for example, the very famous Christine McKenna's The Book of Changes, if you remember, it's a series of interviews with pop culture giants. But what is amazing about this book is that despite the fact that there appears to be no central organizing principle, the book works. Not only does it work, it is interesting and original. So, what makes this book unique? That's the question. And in my opinion, it is the interviewer's style, which combines a certain unobtrusiveness with genuine curiosity. The style elicits sometimes unexpected and sometimes thought provoking responses from the interviewees. And the hallmark of a good interviewer is this unobtrusiveness. We find that Mrs. Soundaranayaki quietly directs the conversation, but from the background. She takes a back step, letting the voices of the interviewees dominate. This is great tactic, and I think this is germane to the success of the book.
Very well said, Dr. Chitra. I mean, this is indeed a unique book, even though there is no unifying theme. Yet it continues to generate interest in the reader in a very different way. I would like to now move on to Mr. Pichappan. You have authored white papers that were published in leading business magazines. What is your take about the book?
Oh, my papers were very technical. But, first of all, I want to applaud Soundaranayaki for what she has accomplished so far. She has an illustrious career, in the remaining years. From a very humble beginning as a self-started journalist, having done 47 interviews and 11 events from the last 22 years. It's amazing. And especially, I think much more the uniqueness in her style is the subjects that she has selected. All illustrious subjects in different fields, very well accomplished subjects. And as Chitra said, simple questions, natural curiosity that anyone would have. That's how she has posed her questions. It is the subjects who interpret those questions in different ways, and they give the different facets. And so it's so enriching when you start reading. Some people taking the time to answer those questions very deeply, and I was able to learn quite a bit when I read the book on the 47 interviews. Very unique style. Any curiosity, any person would have the same kind of questions when you meet those illustrious people. And ranging from not only their professional accomplishments, but she also goes into the personal side. And that's where you learn quite a bit, when you read these interviews. That's my perspective. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Mr. Pichappan, and especially for sharing a lot more about the author, Soundarya. It is indeed a remarkable journey, and I really admire the simplicity with which she has interviewed, like you mentioned, and is able to bring the best from the people she has interviewed. Thank you so much for your inputs. I would like to move on to Mr. Rajaram. You are the advisor to the Tamil Language Council related activities in Singapore. What is your opinion about the book?
I'm going to start off by repeating what the earlier two panelists have said, only because I think it is worth repeating. And the point is, this is a book that has got a staggering range of personalities and specializations that are being interviewed and discussed. And that is not something that ought to be looked at lightly. We have in this book politicians to sportsmen to musicians who are being interviewed. And to be able to interview such a large range of people, you need to be agile and particularly skillful. And that comes through in the interviews quite clearly. I would hazard a guess, some of these interviews, particularly the politicians, the people in public life, would have probably encountered even hostile interviewers. She was not hostile. The tone and the question was very friendly. But think that didn't draw away the interviewer from asking difficult questions. She played to their strengths. So when it came to, say, for example, Mr. Chandrababu, she asks very specifically about his views on Singapore as a role model. And anyone who is familiar with Mr. Chandrababu would know that he holds Singapore in high regard, and she starts off by asking him what he thinks about it. And I'm quite sure that line of questioning put him at ease. She speaks to Kumari Anandan, talks about his relationship with Kamarajar and Rajiv Gandhi, and it's very well known. He's close to them, and his involvement in the language. So that points to a certain amount of spade work that has gone on in the interview. That the interviewer has taken the trouble to. She has done some background research on these people. Starts off by asking questions that you're comfortable with, and draws out the best in them. But I also want to highlight that doesn't stop her from asking difficult question. One particular question stands in mind. She speaks to Mr. Keso Bani. She asks, "Do you believe in karma?" And I wonder what triggered that question, but that must have stumped him. But it adds to the flavor of the interview. So it makes for a very interesting read overall. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Rajaram, for highlighting the broad range of people that she has interviewed. And I really like that the point that you made, that she has this unique ability to develop a rapport, not sound hostile, and then ask the difficult questions as well. And she has, and you gave various examples about that. So that was I think those are very important insights. Thank you so much. Now, I'd like to ask Mr. Narayanan. You have a vast experience in the consultancy space, and you work with clients across the globe. So what is your perspective? What do you think about the style of the author?
Thanks, Preeti. My perspective, it shows her passion, which she has sustained for nearly 20 plus years. If someone has been doing this for more than 20 plus years, then it clearly shows that they love doing what they're doing. And the very interesting part about this book is it's a very breezy, light read kind of a book. Anyone could just pick it up, have a cup of tea, go through it, and still be having some value add after reading through this, which is a mark of a great book, right? And it also shows her interest in some areas. While she has covered a diverse set of areas, if you see, most interviews are bunched around either in arts or in the politician, diplomat kind of space. So my guess is maybe these are areas which she really has a natural affinity towards. And it also shows that she sort of some of the interviews are prepared in terms of maybe the interviews were thought through, and the appointments were made and they were conducted, but some interviews have been just in terms of maximizing the time available. Case in point being the interview done with Chandrababu Naidu when he was just sort of rushing to the airport. And some interviews are just plain examples of her courage, right? Like the interview with Kalaignar Karunanidhi was a case and example. It didn't stop her from sort of reaching out and checking if he would be willing to be interviewed. So it does reflect a bit of her personality in that sense as well. And the interviews are very structured, and you can see it evolving her style, right? Like the initial interviews which she did with the film director S.P. Muthuraman or R.T. Ramaswamy, they're more pointed, specific kind of questions. But as she progresses in this journey, you can clearly see that the questions are more open-ended and allowing the interviewers to sort of share their personality and open up. And she starts with a strong area, which is more around their professional accomplishments. And she gets into their personal personal side of things and how they grew up and what kind of like advices do they have for the future generation. So that's my take on it. All in all, a thoroughly enjoyable book.
Thank you so much, Mr. Narayanan. I really agree with what you said. The book is like a breeze, and it's something that you can carry in your bag or on your laptop screen and just read and feel inspired by the range of people that she has covered. And like you rightly said, her passion is very evident from because of the years that she has spent in this area, and her character. You see the courage, and actually the interview that you spoke to me just spoke mentioned just now about Mr. Karunanidhi. She just went there and she went for the interview. I was remembering that when you mentioned just now. So thank you all for your very good replies and a good take on this particular question. And now I would like to go for our second question. That is, you all of you have mentioned about the different range of people that she has interviewed. So, what are your perceptions of the individuals she has interviewed in the book, and whose personality influenced you the most, and why? I would like to begin with Mr. Pichappan now. You have traveled across the globe to 31 countries and covered more than 2 million miles. I would like to begin with you, Mr. Pichappan.
Yeah, thank you, Preeti. Yes, I love to meet people, see countries, and learn. When I read this book, I learned a lot because she covered a wide range of people in different fields. The people that I wouldn't have met, I would have met more business people and common people. But she meeting politicians, sportsmen, music. So it's also shows her interest. So when I read through the book from the politicians, a couple of people really impressed me, which I didn't. I knew about Sam Petroda, what he did on the communication side, but his passion for India, even though he was in the US, that kind of motivates me to give back to the country, even though I'm sitting in the US for 30 years. If Sam can do it, we should also contribute back to the country. And some of the ideas that he had were, which I didn't know, I learned only through the interview, was the free education system. We have a very fixed education system. You got to go to the 10+2, and then go through your graduation and this and all that. When he talks about a free education system, which when I read through it in the book, I said, hey, that's a great point. Instead of forcing people to get into a fixed education system, the free system will be much more productive and valuable to each individuals. When I read through Shashi Tharoor, I knew Shashi more from a politician, MP, a statesman, even interested in cricket and all that. But I never knew about his United Nations experience. So that was what I learned from the interview. And the way Shashi, he loves to speak, he loves to write, but how Soundaranayaki was able to engage him in wide range of topics. And she even got into the personal side of him, what he was going through a few years ago. I wouldn't have touched on that subject. I would have avoided that subject completely. But she touched on that. And I learned about that and how he's handling that difficult situation. And he was forthright, very earnest in his reply. And that's the simple way of unobtrusive, not aggressive. She was more natural, more in the sense of like the Larry Kings, and post a question, know the subject very well, ask wide range of topics, and they come across very well. So I was quite impressed with, Shashi, the way he came across, Sam, he came across, and I learned a lot from all these interviews. But I just wanted to pick those two.
Thank you so much, Mr. Pichapan. And I had the same impression when I read Mr. Tarur's interview. I had no idea about his stint with the UN either. And I was surprised. It was not very, it was 30 years, something that I should have known. And the light and the way she handled the questions, and as you just mentioned, was really, it really highlights her own character and her style. I would like to now move to Mr. Raja Ram. You're actively involved in community work. I would like to hear from you next. Who is the person?
Well, it's probably not one person. It's a few people.
Yeah.
But there is one theme that this book seems to coalesce around. It's quite amazing. And what I seem to notice from the interviews, and these are all successful, invariably successful, well-read personalities that are being interviewed. And I thought what came through in almost all the interviews, if not most of the interviews, is that how modest they are of their achievements. I don't think I detected even a hint of bragging. And they describe themselves mostly in a matter-of-fact way, business-like manner, and went about saying what they've done rather quietly, despite the huge achievement. So, Soundara Kailasam describes the success as what she will do hereafter, and despite the fact that she's a very heavily decorated, medaled woman, she talks about her success not as something that has already been achieved, but something that will be achieved. The other point that I thought that came through, another fact that I thought that came through in the interviews, that a modest upbringing or background does not have to be a hindrance to achieve a measure of success. So a number of people here, almost too many to mention, with a fairly humble background, who seem to have done very well for themselves. And having done well for themselves, these are people who seem to have very clear and strong views. And I think that has contributed to the success in life, in their lives, and in their career. So Justice Lakshmanan, for example, says that he never felt guilty about or dissatisfied with any of his judgments. And that takes a certain strength of character to say something like that. Not iota of doubt. I did my best. I don't intend to dwell on it. Mr. Kesavabani says that service to mankind is service to God. And these nuggets, these anecdotes point to people who have strong views, and it is this principled strong views that have led them to where they are, to achieve the measure of success that they've attained. And I think it is to the credit of the interviewer, she's been able to bring this out so effectively in the interviews.
Thank you so much, Mr. Rajaram, and specifically for sharing certain anecdotes from the book that really touched your heart. And I do remember a few of them. I felt the same when I read it, especially the point that you make that most of them have made it from the humble beginnings, but what led to their success is the strength of their character, their personality, their point of views. And it is really the art that the author Soundaranayaki has, that she has been able to reach out to that level of depth during her interview. Now I would like to ask Dr. Chitra, you teach and have published in the fields of post-colonial and feminist theory and environmental humanities. What is your take on this?
It's a very interesting, but I would say a difficult question, because there's so much to say, and a lot of my thoughts also overlap with what the previous two speakers have already said. But let me refine upon a few of them. To me, one of the more alluring aspects of the recorded interviews is the way in which it reveals certain distinctive facets of individual personalities. So, people, you were talking about humble background and great successes. For me, the interview with the former president S.R. Nathan stood out. His responses are focused, spontaneous, and entirely natural, and it comes from the heart. Anyone who has known the former president even slightly will immediately recognize the personality that shines through. And this is of someone who's essentially unassuming yet highly intelligent. And it's interesting that he refuses to speak about himself. For many people, this is a great lure to expand about themselves, but he refuses to take the bait. He consistently deflects questions that probe his interiority, and I found that very interesting. So he comes across as personable, as approachable, but also as a private person. He's someone who has witnessed hardships, and we realize that, and he has taken away important lessons from them. Like Mr. Rajaram mentioned, they're all grounded, though they've risen so high from very humble backgrounds. I think there is a weightiness in the way he and others like him ponder questions. There's a certain gravitas, I think, that is alluring and that's interesting. So, for instance, Mr. Nathan harks back to his mother's advice, right? And so what is transparent is that he's completely unaffected by his great successes in life. I also found it interesting to compare the interviews of, with Mr. Veeramani and also with, I think it was the other person, Dr. Sashi Tharoor. I think Mr. Pichiyappan mentioned Dr. Sashi Tharoor and also Mr. Rajaram, two Indian politicians. And what struck me was that though they are both politicians, they come from such different ideological locations. The responses elicited are very, very different. And that made it so interesting and exciting. And to me, that revealed the, ability of the interviewer, right? So if you just take Mr. Veeramani's, style, it was very matter of fact, occasionally intense. Whereas Dr. Tharoor is more loquacious, light-hearted, even when he's dealing with difficult questions. Mr. Veeramani's answers are factual, whereas Dr. Tharoor embellishes his answers with graphic examples, such as of him reading 365 books in a year when he was just 12 years old. So what struck me while reading through these interviews was how, with her very natural style, Soundaranayaki is able to ensure that their varying and diverse personalities emerge so distinctively. I thought that this truly added value to the interviews and to the book as a whole. And I think therein lies the talent of Mrs. Soundaranayaki as an interviewer, that she bends to the contours of the conversation and she adjusts to the characteristics of the interviewees, making it possible for their personalities to emerge. I found this a great talent, and a talent that not very many people have.
Thank you so much, Dr. Chitra, for sharing in depth about and also comparing two different kinds of interviews and how Soundaranayaki has been able to bring about those special characteristics and distinguish between, their own accomplishments, their own thought process, which highlights Soundaranayaki's own personal style and accomplishment. I would like to now move on to Mr. Narayanan. It's very interesting to note that you actively engage in quizzing and mentoring as well. It'll be interesting to hear your comments next.
Hey, thanks, Preeti. And it's actually very, very heartening to hear the view from other panelists, right? Like clearly the book has like impacted all of us at different levels, and each one of us has a different kind of takeaway. Now, I read somewhere that the best interviews actually sound more like a conversation rather than like putting your interviewee into a grilling session, right? You just want to highlight on few questions and you want the interviewers to sort of like ponder upon that and like reflect upon that. And this book actually gives ample examples of like people sneak peek into their personalities because it's styled more as a conversation rather than uh, a rapid fire kind of like interviewing, right? So the first one was like the interview with Mr. P. Chidambaram, I which was like very very interesting. Like he's a qualified lawyer. He's educated as an MBA grad, and he was the finance minister, right? So his love for numbers and his attention to details sort of like gets reflected all through the interview. If you read through his interview, right, it's extremely analytical in style and it's like peppered with a lot of like fact points, which actually tells, which is how you would probably want your finance minister to be, right? The second thing which I spotted in some of the interviews was the strong influence of their childhood, which manifest later. Most of them have had strong parent-child relationship in terms of like steering the choices they made. Case in point was like Dr. Sirgari Siva Chidambaram, right? His dad really didn't want him to be a musician to begin with, and he was just going through his academic journey, and then at a tender age of like 10, he basically like says like, no, I really want to take up like music, and his dad doesn't make it easy for him, right? Like he wants to test his resolve, and he takes him through a really hard ship of like, okay, wake up at like 4 o'clock, let's go through your tal accounts and let's see how what you're made of. So really his dad really wanted to test out like if this guy was like passionate about it. And in his words, he says he was an average student, but what a personality, right? Like he succeeded not only in the medical profession but equally as a musician. And his simplicity, which was imbibed from his father, has also got transferred to his like children as well, right? Like they also recount in the interview. So that actually shows that what kind of like the upbringing people have gets reflected in their like later part of their like life. And some of them have had magical interventions. The case of like Justice A.R. Lakshmanan, whose father was like convinced by his friend to basically send him to Madras and like practice in law, right? So he had a very, very happy intervention, which completely changed the journey he had. And here was this gentleman who passed close to about like 98,000 judgments in his like practice as a judge, which is like phenomenal, right? And the third thing which I thought was interesting was like most of the celebrities are voracious readers. We have spoken enough about Shashi Tharoor, and I also saw that mention of like 365 books a year, right? Like at age 12. Phenomenal, right? Like when we complain about like time availability, he's a guy at such a young age who really like went after it. So that's one. People like Kalanga Karunanidhi, again, like he also like goes through it. Interesting bit was like Sujata Rangarajan, right? Here is a accomplished needs to actually read more for me. So in all, it becomes like really difficult to pick out like one interviews, but I think the listeners would have got a sense of like some of the interviews which really stuck a chord with me.
Absolutely. It is indeed a very tough question to ask which particular personality affected you the most. And I like the way you answered it. You drew commonalities between various interviews, and the way you highlighted that it is the effect of early childhood, and it is the effect of, also a lot of good writers used to read a lot, and that was a very interesting insight that you brought in front of all of us. Thank you so much, Mr. Narayanan, for that. Now I would like you all to be a little more specific and share what impressed you the most in the book. Also, what are the top few takeaways that you would like to share with us? I would like to begin with Mr. Rajaram.
So, I was very tempted to switch off the camera and opt out of this question. This is almost an impossible question to answer, given the range of personalities and professions and people who have been interviewed for this book. But the thing that stands out in the book, and I'm deliberately speaking in very general terms, is if you pose a question, why would you want to get hold of this book? Why would you want to buy this book? And my response to that would be, it gives you a certain diversity and range of viewpoints in one tome, in one piece of document, on a whole set of issues. And I think that is a good enough reason to buy this book, and the take on issues of the day, some of which are evergreen issues, life in general, and occasionally the recipe for success by very successful people. These are all things that one should look out for in the book. So that's not a single takeaway, but I'll still take a stab at the maybe two things that particularly impressed me. So I would club Sam Petroda, Subbarao, and Raj Chetty as one group, because you read these interviews together, you get a sense of these people are essentially, among other things, they have a strong grasp of economics. They have a strong interest in the development of India. And I think there are some extremely important points that have been raised. These are also not the same people. That's stating the obvious, but it still needs to be stated. Sam Petroda is not Subbarao. Subbarao is a former RBI governor, and Raj Chetty is an economist from Harvard. So very, very different backgrounds where they are, but all talking about very similar thing. And this is essentially development economics that they're talking about in relation to a particular country in India. What makes it even more interesting is that these interviews were done many, many years ago, and it provides a nice backdrop compared to what is going on right now in India. Some of the points there that are made are quite prescient. Some have actually become a little out of date, but that makes it all the more interesting. I also want to highlight another two people. Again, I've clubbed them together, and these two people are completely opposite people. One is Sirgari Sivasidambaram, and the other person is A.C. Muthaiah. They both talk about, and needless to say, this is my favorite topic, about the importance of culture and language, and how that has contributed to who they are. Sirgari Sivasidambaram is both a musician and a doctor. And it's not entirely surprising that he talks about the influence of language and culture and his upbringing and how he has turned out. They are less so. You would think that this is a man who's an industrialist, businessman, and he wouldn't delve into this area, but he does. plunges head on, and he talks about in very vivid terms as to how this has his language and culture has anchored him towards success. And I think these are key takeaways for me. And I would encourage anyone who picks up the book to read those two interviews.
Thank you so much, Mr. Rajaram. Those were wonderful takeaways, and I especially like that you highlighted there's so much diversity in the range of personalities that Soundaranayaki has interviewed, and yet there are certain common things that lead to everyone's success, and. And now I would like to move to Mr. Narayanan, or what is your take? What impressed you the most in the book?
See, going through the book, right, like there are close to about like 50 plus interviews which have been covered in this book. And most of it has been celebrities in India and Indians living in Singapore. One thing which really stood out for me was multiculturalism in Singapore, how it gets celebrated. Being the interviews which were conducted with a lot of like community leaders, the love they have for the society around them gets amply reflected in these interviews. The second was you learn about a lot about like Singapore as a country, how it functions, and how much people outside Singapore yearn for such amount of like systematic, disciplined kind of like delivery and organized like lifestyle, right? And I saw this interview with, I read this interview with like Chandrababu Naidu, where he says Singapore is probably the best example to give of a governing democracy which delivers function to its citizens, right? And that's something which stands out as a great example for countries like India to emulate. If they're looking for a model to function, then this is a great model to adopt. The other things which stood out was like I don't know if it was like a interviewer bias, but I think the most sought after like personality, what is mentioned by most of the interviewees were Lee Kuan Yew. Not to take any sheen away from Mr. Lee Kuan Yew, he's done a lot and he's a great example, but almost like it was like a response which most celebrities had as the personality who had a strong influence on them. And there were also some valuable nuggets of life spread throughout the book. Some standouts for me were the remark by S.R. Nathan about like doing your duty and don't expect rewards. Indrani Raja shared a very interesting anecdote where she basically sang Tamil and Hindi songs in an event, right? And she takes the readers through about like the preparation she had to put for it. And a very interesting line where she remarks saying that if you hold back from learning something just because you're afraid that you might fail or someone will laugh at you, then you will never learn. I think this is something which is like which should be close for all of us when we are getting into an era of like upskilling ourselves, right? Learn, unlearn, and like relearn is almost like a mantra since last year for all of us. And Indrani Raja made this remark like a few decades ago when this interview was like conducted. The next was around career transitions. Like for us, like we look at all these celebrities with a lot of awe, right? Like going through the interview, you realize that some of the fears they have and some of the challenges they've gone through are relatable, are extremely relatable. Like for example, like Mr. Shashi Tharoor, he was a very, very accomplished bureaucrat in United Nations, but his career transition to the Indian political system was extremely bumpy. And he was like very, very sincere and genuine in laying this out for readers to understand. So when we make any career transitions, we have similar kind of like challenges, and irrespective of like the level you rise up to, you still could run into similar kind of challenges. And on the fun side, there were a lot of like fun factoids as well throughout this like book. I didn't know Sam Pitroda was like called as like Satyanarayan until I read this interview. Right. The second was around Justice Lakshman delivering about like 98,000 plus judgments. That's like just staggering, right? And about an orchid being named after Amitabh Bachchan. So these are like things which we would have like passed as we went through the years, but great reminders, and some of them were like really, really new information to me as well. So good learning experience on the fun side as well. So those were my takeaways from the book.
Thank you for sharing such wide range of takeaways, and you pinpointed certain interviews, like you mentioned about Indrani Raja, and that really resonated very well with me as well. And you pointed out how she's challenged herself by singing the song in the two languages that she didn't know. And there are other stories about different people who have challenge themselves in different ways. But what I also like is that you also mentioned about the takeaways regarding the two nations as well. So Singapore is indeed it is a country that a lot of countries would like to emulate. And by drawing parallels by the people situated in different countries, and what are the commonalities and how the country has developed, I think those are wonderful takeaways as well. Thanks a lot for sharing. It is indeed very difficult to highlight one or two takeaways from this very informative book. I would now like to request Dr. Chitra for her comments.
Thank you, Preeti. Again, a very challenging question. What impressed me most about the book? Okay, so I would say one of the things that I found really unusual and impressive is the very heterogeneity of the content and the way this was managed. I thought this was unusual and interesting. So, as everybody mentioned, there were interviews. Again, the people interviewed emerged from various walks of life. We have economists, we have diplomats, we have politicians, we have community leaders, spiritual leaders, and so forth. But we also have recordings of events, such as of Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong opening the Malay Heritage Center, or the 4th South Asian Diaspora Conference or Convention. There was a health fair mentioned. There was also Mr. Narendra Modi's Singapore visit, and so on and so forth. So like the diverse range of personalities interviewed, I thought the events recorded also seem completely disassociated from each other, right? There seems to be no commonality. It's not, everything is not about health fairs. It's not that everything is about politicians and recording. Politicians visiting. So this is the word that I think defines this book, and that is heterogeneity. In every way, in every kind of order, there is this kind of heterogeneity. And so what is it that makes this book interesting? Yes, it is the heterogeneity, but it also makes it eminently readable. And I think if it comes to that, it is the unexpectedness, for me, the unexpectedness of the content. One is not quite sure what one will next encounter when you turn a page, right? And this for me was interesting. That very unaccountability that makes you want to know what is around the corner, to peek over the wall, or it tugs at your curiosity. And that is ultimately the most elemental emotion that in fact prods any human being to open the pages of a book and read, right? Curiosity is what propels you to read. So the impulse to learn, to know, to understand, I think this book satisfies that. curiosity is definitely what drove me forward in reading this book. And I think there is a certain charm about the ad hoc arrangement, a certain allure to this kind of impromptu design that gives a momentum to the book, in fact. And this was, for me, an interesting and unusual feature. And you can see that Mrs. Soundaranayaki has made use of all the opportunities that have, and this was something that Mr. Narayan also mentioned, that have come her way to interact with people. Some of them are famous, some not so famous, some ordinary, and to record events that she felt were significant, right? So all this makes me feel that the takeaway for me points to one thing, and that is the consistency and perseverance of the author. And this shines through, right? The time span, as was mentioned, was very impressive. The first interview is dated 2001 and the preface is dated 2021. So we're talking about a 20-year span. And this is no mean feat. To persist with efforts over 2 decades takes a lot of grit and focus. It takes willpower, it takes enormous effort. You know, people like me who are academics and are engaged professionally in the writing of research books and research articles, we know how difficult it is to sustain interest in a project beyond a certain point in time. You want to finish that project and move on to the next one. But Mrs. Soundaranayaki has persisted in her endeavor for over 2 decades. This diligence for me is its own reward and needs to be applauded, appreciated, and emulated. So this is my greatest and most, I would say, the aspect of the book that most impressed me. And these are the takeaways that I have, which focus not only on the content, but also on the author. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Chitra, for so beautifully summarizing these takeaways. And I like the way you said that heterogeneity, unexpectedness of the book. And then, it that is what made it like a breeze. We don't know what is going to come next, and all the personalities that she has covered are people whom I would have loved to know, and they're all there in the book. And then, and the way you summarized it, that one of the best thing that comes out from the book is the personality of Mrs. Soundaranayaki herself. Her own courage, her own grit, her own determination to persevere despite, for 2 decades, as you pointed out, I think is in itself a great takeaway for all of us, a learning for all of us, an inspiration for all of us. So that was wonderful. Thank you so much. Now, I would like to ask Mr. Pichappan, what impressed you the most in the book, and what are the takeaways that you would like to share with us?
It's very difficult to go as the last person because all the first three have read the book inside out and covering all aspects of it. But I'll try to cover some points which I thought has not been covered. One thing is, I think it's a unique book. Why it's unique is in one place I can, Narayan pointed out, in a breeze, I can have a cup of coffee and go through all the careers of all these people, Also, as everyone pointed out, when you look at the book, especially this kind of a book, you don't only get it from the personalities she has interviewed, you also get things from the author, okay, because it spans 20 years. What is the author, the interviewer? The person who he has gone through the last 20 years, how it started off, what kind of questions she was asking. I was even chatting with Soundaranayaki yesterday. I said, hey, you should organize this book in a yearly fashion, subject basis, so that it's easy to see, because that's what I got out of it. The other aspect is what I learned from all these subjects, with the exception of A.C. Muthaiah or P. Chidambaram, everyone started from a that really motivated me. Everyone started from a very humble beginning. No one had a huge background, very middle class, and everyone came up through their hard work, and everyone reached their heights through the passion and hard work and dedication. And that's where all the interviews, the humbleness comes from. Even you take SR Nathan, everyone had a very simple beginning, and the way where they ended. So in the interview process, their hard work and passion and how they came about comes through. So that's the key takeaway for me on the subject, on the author of the book. And also, I think it's a unique book in the sense, without putting effort, going and searching Google or something in one shot, you can take get the perspective of the top 47 personalities.
Thank you, Mr. Pichappan. Absolutely, I completely agree with what you said. We don't have to go to YouTube and Google. We just have to have the book with us. And Mrs. Soundaranayaki has very well covered some very, very eminent personalities that we would all like to know more about. And I love the way you mentioned that it is the humble beginnings that each one of them has. And then through sheer determination and hard work, they have risen to the level that they have. And it is a great inspiration for all of us that we can aspire to be somewhat like them, despite the challenges, and learn from each personality who has been interviewed in the book. So thank you so much for sharing. Now we would move to a broader question. And a more forward-looking question. How do you think the book can be beneficial to the aspiring youth? Quick question to all of you. I would like to begin with Mr. Narayanan.
Okay, thanks, Preeti. I'll keep it short. I think three things really stood out for me, right? And I think those could also be good food for thought for like budding youngsters. One is you can have a humble beginning, but you can actually change it and rise to becoming impacting lives of like people around you through sheer hard work and strong educational foundation. I think it really stands out. And Mr. Pichapan actually alluded to this for the earlier query as well, right? I think it really stands out because most of the interviewees have not been born in a very privileged kind of a background. I've actually risen to this position through years of hard work, be it like Dr. Sivachidambaram actually mentioning about this, that he was an average student who excelled with hard work. So I think there's like no substitute, no shortcut, no replacement. You have to put in your yards, right? So that was one. The second is follow your passion. And that gets reflected both with the interviews which are published in the book as well as from the author. And when you are in the journey and pursuit of passion, things can magically happen to you. Even getting an interview with the chief minister, sitting chief minister of like Tamil Nadu, right? Like just passing by his house, you can stop and have an interview with him. They are accessible. So be in the journey of passion and things can happen to you, right? You put yourself in a very strong position. The third is the special bond between India and Singapore. So if you really want to know about like why Singapore is like functioning well, how the community is like so vibrant, pick up this book. This has a lot of information which gives you some practical insights as to how you can make it happen in the society in which you are in. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Mr. Narayanan. I mean, you very beautifully summarized the amazing takeaways that this book has for the aspiring youth, not just the youth, people like us as well. We can continue to, diligently work towards our goals. So thank you so much. Next, I would like to move on to Mr. Rajaram.
I'd probably not prescribe what you can take away from this book, because there is so much you can point to. But I'd like to highlight just a couple couple of things. Well, this book is a very rare, provides very rare insights of the thought processes of a very diverse group of successful people. And I think that's what I would call a unique selling point of the book. So, it's not likely that you're going to hit upon a publication or a book that has got such a wide range of people sharing experiences and what led them to where they are. I also would urge any young person who picks up this book to read the book not necessarily in awe of the people featured in this book, but read the book critically, read the book in depth, and also read it critically. We don't have to agree with everything that's being said in the book, but this book provides a good exercise as to what your own views would be on the various topics that are being discussed. Things like culture, what leads to success, what leads to development, and things of that sort. Third, these are people who are featured who have gone through ups and downs in life. Some of them very serious downs in life, and you could relate it to what is happening right now. What is the strength in character? What is the probity that has led them to persevere and endure and still come out on top? And these are things that are discussed in various interviews and various parts of the book. I also want to conclude by mentioning one point. This is not a book about great people doing great things. We highlighted a number of them. This is also a book about ordinary people doing great things. And I would like to highlight at least one person who's probably not known outside Singapore very well, but I know him personally, and the person is rightly featured in this book. Amir Ali Abjali is a civil servant, and he is like many of us, and he is currently the president, or he was at least the president of the Muslim Kidney Action Association. He served as the member of the interreligious organization in Singapore, as the trustee of the Adil Fitri Trust, and the president of the National Safety Council. Look at the involvement the man has. He has obviously taken the trouble, taken the time out to contribute. And I think there are lessons to be drawn from people like this too. And I hope that the youth who read this are able to draw those lessons.
Thank you, Mr. Rajaram, for so beautifully putting it. That you just don't read it about a few articles or interviews written about some very famous people. Read it critically with your own perspectives, and then try to understand. And I also like the statement that you made. It is not a book about famous people. It's a book about ordinary people who became famous. So and Mr. Rami, really, I was also surprised to see him, and I've known him personally, and I felt very nice that Mrs. Soundaranayaki has identified people from such diverse fields, social work as well. So this book is indeed very, very inspiring for all of us. I would now like to request Dr. Chitra for her views.
Thank you, Preeti. This book, how can it benefit aspiring youth? I think that is a very thought-provoking question. Like the previous speakers mentioned, the book has a lot to offer by way of just understanding humanity, right? And I think that's important for youth. Understanding humanity, especially in this digital age, when you really, the millennials, the youngsters don't have an opportunity or even the interest to get to know a lot of people in real life. They're most of the time closeted in their virtual worlds. And I think that is why it is important for them to read about these kinds of interviews, which are like, biographical depictions of people. And as was mentioned, these are not famous people who are talking about their achievements. These are people who are talking as ordinary people about their ordinary way of conducting their lives and ordinary ways of interacting with other people. And I think there is a lesson to be learned for youngsters from this. How do you actually benefit from interacting with people? And this is what Soundaranayaki has done. She's interacted with people, human to human, right? As a person to another person. And that is an art and that's a talent. And not many people have it. And that is something that stands by you through life. And I think the millennials, the young people across all spectrums of society have to learn to do that. That is one important point, I thought. The second one is very interesting, and that is, we all read about how the way the millennials, the youth, consume books these days is very different from the way that it was traditionally consumed. And that is, they do not like chronology, they do not like linear readings. So this book is absolutely perfect in that sense because you can just open any page and start reading about someone. You don't have to follow chronology. You can start at the back of the book and then go back to the front and then go to the middle, and you're not really missing anything because the sheer, as I mentioned, the heterogeneity as well as the ad hoc arrangement, in fact, suits the millennials. It suits their mindset. It's a bit like, how they access, social media. So in that sense, I think this book is very fitting for the century in which it has been produced and published. But ultimately, I think what it showcases is the sincerity and diligence and what this can achieve. The laudable trait of Soundaranayaki should be an inspiration for youth. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Chitra. I really like the way you mentioned that this book really opens the minds of people, and as it is a collection of biographical depictions, and it is really a very forward-looking book and very apt for millennials as well. I didn't think about it, but as you mentioned, I think that's a very, very pertinent point that you made. So they can just read from anywhere without really worrying about what happened in the previous chapters. So thank you so much. And I completely agree with you that the most inspirational part of the book is the author herself. Yeah, I would now like to, request Mr. Pichappan for his point of view, his comments.
Yeah, I think the question is more about aspiring youth or what they would, get from the book. I see it from two aspects. I think it was covered, but I just want to go into some key points here. One from the authors, Soundaranayaki, one with no media big name behind her, no organization supporting her. It is one individual who is interviewed and these 47 illustrious personalities. Whereas she doesn't have any backing. It's just an individual. So that's a big message to any aspiring journalist. You can come from any backing. If you have the passion, if you have the artwork, you can reach out to anyone. So that's a big message from the book. The other one, from the subjects she has interviewed, as it was pointed out, I can take the book and pick any page. But not only that, I can pick any subject. If, for example, I'm a sportsman, I'm interested to learn about sports personalities, I can go and look at Jawaharlal Srinath or Arati. If I am a politician, I can talk about, learn about Shashi Tharoor and the others there, economists. So any subject, since it covers a wide range of subject, you will get to learn on any subject. And in fact, even if you're not interested in the subject, by just reading through the interview of these people, you will learn. And as the common point, which is important, this is very, very important. A lot of young aspiring youth who come from a humble beginning think that it's very difficult to achieve something. They kind of inhibitions are there. But if they go through this book, it clearly shows that if you work hard and if you have the right attitude, both from the author as well as from the subject, that's a common message that comes across. That's a big message to the aspiring youth, which you won't get it. As a dad, I can say this to my kids, but when they look at these personalities, when they read about them, they learn on their own that they can make this happen. So I would encourage every young kid to read this book from that aspect, just from that aspect alone.
Thank you so much, Mr. Pichappan, for sharing that. And actually, like you said, it is very, very inspiring for all for the youth who think that it is very difficult to accomplish challenging goals. But here, all the stories, every story that is mentioned in the book is an example that through perseverance we can, and it reaffirms that faith and belief. And then the author herself, like you also mentioned, these were the people who were very difficult to reach out to. A person without a solid media backing or backing of some strong support group, it would have been very difficult to reach. But because she was so passionate about the job that she was doing, she just reached out to everybody. So I think it really highlights how, if we really believe in our dreams, if we are really passionate about something, it doesn't matter from where we start. It doesn't matter where we are. What matters is how much we believe in our dreams. How much are we ready to do? How much we are ready to, put in, and with the courage and the grit and the determination, everything is possible. And this Mrs. Soundaranayaki has very well kind of shown through her personal example. I would really like to thank each and every one of you for your amazing inputs and insights. You have set the context for the book by touching upon the nuances that make this book uniquely inspiring and extremely interesting. Thanks a lot for your time and your inputs once again. I would like to give a huge round of applause to each one of you, and especially our author, Ms. Soundaranayaki. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Hello friends! For your videography, photography, events coverage, feature, short film, music video and advertisement needs, contact Brainstars at 8799 3545.